An eviction moratorium bill looms as a second stimulus package agreement is coming by Friday. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Afternoons LALATE. Hope you're good and safe. Afternoons LALATE is every day at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time, starting with the check, then going to hazard pay at 4, FPUC at 4:30, and finally rent assistance at 5 o'clock. Big news overnight about rent assistance, which is part of the second stimulus package. There is a quote which I got overnight that I have in front of me, and I got to tell you, it makes me nervous. It's not bad news that it makes me nervous. Where are we on rent eviction moratoriums? Well, the president has said all last week he was in favor of a rent eviction moratorium. He wanted it in the second stimulus package, even though he didn't put it in his bill. We know what happened with that. That was Mitch who wrote a bill, and the president had no say in it. Steve Mnuchin said he wanted a rent eviction moratorium. And when I say rent eviction moratorium, it includes also mortgage forbearance, so you don't lose your home or apartment building. And Larry Kudlow said the same thing. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer have been in that room with Mark Meadows and Steve Mnuchin every single day since last week negotiating over the second stimulus package. Rent eviction has been reported by this channel as one of the items that they are not deadlocked on, that they got it approved early on. We reported that last Friday, that eviction moratoriums have been approved by both sides. That's not one of the items that is held up. But what turned out very unusual was a new report obtained by LALATE today, which said that Mark Meadows and Mnuchin made an offer yesterday about eviction moratorium. And when I read it, my jaw sort of dropped. The offer was to extend a moratorium on evictions from federally backed housing into December. Wait a second, LALATE. Why so restrictive? Exactly. The offer from Mnuchin and Meadows on behalf of the Republicans in the negotiations, according to this one report, was only to provide an eviction moratorium for federally backed housing, but not evictions across the country on a federal level. So is this report contradicting all the other reports? Is this report contradicting what the president says? Is this report contradicting what even Mnuchin has said publicly? It's really not clear. There were Democrats in the same negotiations said that they would cut their request for U.S. postal funding from $10 billion to $10 billion from $25 billion. So the report was focusing on, the UPS, and the Democrats said, okay, we'll give $10 billion instead of $25 billion. But suddenly in the report, it dropped in this strange notion that perhaps eviction moratoriums for purposes of Mnuchin and Meadows should only cover federally backed buildings. Here's the rub. If that's the case, we have a very serious circumstance. No one in their right minds thinks that a second stimulus package could ever get approved if it's only a finite eviction moratorium for certain type of buildings and not an eviction moratorium for anyone who can't make the bills during COVID-19. The Democratic proposal proposes an eviction moratorium for everyone of all buildings, not just federally backed buildings, that cannot make rent, that they cannot be evicted during the pandemic until the pandemic settles down. The eviction moratorium of the Democratic proposal under the HEROES Act mirrors what both parties agreed in the first stimulus package, which was for all properties. So why does this one darn report talk about just federally backed buildings? What's really quite strange is when it's talking about eviction moratoriums for federally backed buildings, it almost sounds to suggest that it's talking about federally mortgaged buildings, federally funded mortgage buildings, like Fannie Mae mortgaged buildings. Or does it mean it's public housing? It's really not clear. What has been clear has been the messages from the White House and from the Democrats. Hence, I don't want you to get nervous, like I got nervous when I saw that report. It hasn't been confirmed anywhere else. It hasn't been stated anywhere else. And what has been happening has been much of the following. A sort of rush to scoop. If you don't know, news reporters always like to outscoop the other one. Did Nancy have lunch? Did Nancy have chicken? Did Nancy have fish? They want to outscoop someone else. And I think this report is so contradictory to everything else that we said that I think we should discount it and not really give it too much of a weight of salt. The president has said an eviction moratorium would come place in a second stimulus package, and if it doesn't, he would issue an executive order. That's how strong he is on the subject matter. Steve Mnuchin and Mark Meadows and Larry Kudlow, all in the last 9 days, who are all parts of the Trump administration, have repeated the president's position, which is really great news. There's no mixed message. The only mixed message came from mixed up Mitch himself, McConnell, mixed up Mitch McConnell, who introduced a stimulus package last Monday, which was just tar and feather. And I told you it was going to be tar and feather. It was a crap bill whose only supporter was Representative Crapo. I'm going to run that line as often as I can because I just love it. And no one supported the bill because guess what? It had no eviction moratorium in there. It was so strange that even I think the president had to just jump in and say, I have a comment. And that's what he did. The president had dispatched Mnuchin to Sunday Morning News 24 hours before McConnell introduced his bill to say there will be an eviction moratorium for all people so that no one is thrown on the street, no one is evicted during this pandemic. It was all very clear how Mnuchin spoke. It was all very clear how the president spoke. No one, not just federally backed building tenants, no one is evicted for purposes of eviction moratoriums during this pandemic. And then McConnell did his Kentucky dance and then introduced this bill, which didn't have it in there. Well, what transpired after that was middle of this week, the president kept on coming out and saying, I support an eviction moratorium. I support mortgage forbearance. I support all this. And he has to. You know why? Because everyone, whether it's the president, economists, Marco Rubio, other Republicans, they all say you can't have people causing a collapse of the real estate market because a collapse of the real estate market implodes the U.S. economy. What happens is that if people are thrown out on the street, you have their problem, which is absolutely horrible. I have a lot of viewers who have been thrown out on the street. But it also causes calamity to thousands of other people and ultimately the destruction of the economy. When people are evicted, landlords don't have rent. And so landlords don't have rent to pay their bills. They can't pay their bills. Their bills will fall into foreclosure. Banks will take up the buildings on foreclosure. They don't want banks in foreclosure because then banks don't have the interest and principal that was due, the money that they need to make their bills, and then the banks will collapse. It's a complete meltdown, and it can happen very fast. We've seen it before, and this is actually a more acute circumstance. How does the financial collapse happen? It's basically a massive run on money. And when there's a massive run on money and there's nothing there, everything collapses. We've seen it before in the recession where banks were gone within 2-3 days. They were literally gone. Washington Mutual, gone. Banks are just bought up, merged, and gone within days because all these mortgages collapsed, because properties collapsed, vacancy rates went through the roof, and everyone was left without turmoil. So this gets back to where we are with rent assistance. The bill, as proposed, we don't see the clarity of the language yet. I have been here with you. And I have advised you about the twists and turns of an eviction moratorium. The important things for you to remember as we sit here on a Wednesday afternoon are the following. 1, when is your rent due? Can you make the rent? If you can't, have you been informed by your landlord you're going to be evicted? If you have been informed by your landlord, what is the timeline? These are so important because what's going to happen is that the moment that the bill becomes law, the bill, if it's what we think it is going to say, stop, landlord. You can't evict my viewer tenant. You can't evict anyone. And it's at that very moment, it's an hallelujah moment. Thank God I can't be evicted. But until we're at that point, we're not we're not free and safe. What's also a big issue is that I'm here, you're here, we're getting informed together, we're watching, we're tracking what's happening with eviction moratorium. But the person in the apartment next to you may not know anything. They may not have any idea what's going on. They may not have access to Wi-Fi or internet or telephone or television. They may have no idea, and all they hear about is stimulus check. They may not have any idea about eviction. So the landlord may come to your neighbor who you love great dearly and say, "Get out. I'm evicting you," after the eviction moratorium's passed. That's why you have to not just take my information and inform yourself, but also empower those around you. Finally, a personal message. The spirit of this channel has always been helping one another. I've done it from the very beginning. I'm doing it still to this day. About 3 weeks ago, I launched something called The Private, which is a private Instagram account in which people come in and help one another get their EIDL loans processed by tricks of the trade, contacts that I've obtained. It's been an enormous success where about 10 loans are approved every single day. But it's worked because I asked for one thing and only one thing only, that whoever got loans approved would stay around and help other people, that we would all work together and help one another. It's that sort of spirit that I ask and I implore you to do as to rent eviction moratoriums. There's going to be a bill passed on agreed upon on Friday and passed on Monday and Tuesday, and then signed into law by Tuesday or Wednesday. And if eviction moratoriums are in there, I ask that you really inform your friends, your families, your neighbors about what that law is based upon what I tell you over the next couple days. Because the lapse or lack of information by other people who aren't viewers of the channel may ultimately decide whether they have a home or are homeless. And so what I ask for you to do out of my personal favor is that you help other people just like I'm trying to help you. As always, so what I want you to do is go to the front of this channel. There's a subscribe button. Click the subscribe button and hit the alert button. I'm not just trying to, the reason why I'm doing that is I'm trying to have you clearly on alert when the bill is passed, if there's an eviction moratorium in there. This is one of those things that you literally do need alert for. There's nothing more time of the essence than eviction moratorium. You know, stimulus check, you could finally find that out, you know, maybe turning on CBS. They'll have it after, 500 soap operas and, unemployment assistance, someone on broadcast news will finally get to it. But eviction moratorium is literally a minute by the minute matter. You could be facing eviction on Tuesday and the bill could be passed on Tuesday. You could be served with an eviction notice on Wednesday and the bill could be passed on Wednesday. That's why it's so important to stay with me, because I'm here to literally help you to the minute. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving you. The whole process is far from over. Even when the bill is passed, we have a lot to do, because you got to get your money, you got to keep your home, you got to get your unemployment benefits, you got to get back to normal. Mornings, afternoons, and evenings are not leaving. Coming up next is Evenings with LALATE at 6:45, a 1-hour programming block. Starts with a check. Big developments. There's always a big development in the afternoons lately on stimulus. And then EIDL. As always, stay motivated, stay positive, stay focused, and stay LA for more.